When I think about Climate X from what we've just talked about, do you think of it as an AI platform running models? But then I meet you and you're a climate scientist. My brain was like...
Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm Nick, joined by my co-host Hana. Today we're going to be talking about how climate change is becoming a financial investment risk. So we're joined today by Dr. Navjit Sagoo as well. So if you want to give us a bit more about your career, Nav, because it's super interesting. So as a kid, to understand a bit more about that.
It's definitely not been a kind of a linear path, but no. So yeah, hi, I'm Navjit Sagoo. So I work for Climate X, which is a kind of climate and physical risk company, and I've been there for about 2 years. So I do the science engagement for them, which is really kind of science communication, making sure, you know, the people who are using our data understand the science behind it, you know, making sure it's appropriate for what they want to do. So, you know, there's a wide mix from talking to clients, problem solving with them, to, you know, working with the products and science teams to understand the implications of changing this or doing this will be on the outputs. But yeah, before that, I spent 10 years as a climate scientist, moving around the world doing science. So I worked on a wide range of projects. Very curious, so I would dot around quite a lot. So I started out by trying to kind of break climate models, see how warm a climate they could simulate and see what that tells you about them. Moved to looking at things like clouds, dust, how that impacts the climate. And then on to things like, you know, snowball Earth, which is a really cool and really random period of the Earth about 700 million years ago, where we had ice covering, you know, from the polar regions down to the tropics, and, you know, trying to understand how that happens.
My head went to mammoths.
Beyond mammoths. There was
mammoth.
a brief period of mammoths as well, so the ice ages.
Yeah.
Did a little bit on that as well too. But yeah, so spent a long time doing research, and then was like, you know what, I actually want to do something that's a bit more applied and a bit more working with, you know, people who are trying to do things now.
So what is Climate X?
Climate X, so we provide kind of physical risk data. So what we're trying to do is we're looking at the world and understanding how the climate is going to change, you know, in the future. We go all the way up to kind of 2100 and see how things like floods, storms, wildfires might change because of that change in climate that's happening right now.
Amazing.
Okay. Interesting. And like, in terms of how this is being engaged then, so I mean, obviously, I imagine this is a lot of businesses in real estate, you know, in what we're looking at, data centers that are approaching a business like yours to be like, where should we build?
Yeah,
right?
yeah, 100%. So I guess there's a few use cases. So we work with a lot of real estate, a lot of asset managers, also a lot of kind of financial services. But yeah, often it's people doing due diligence. So, you know, I want to buy this or I want to build this. Where should I do it? It's also people who already have those those buildings and those assets, and are trying to understand, you know, how good is this? Have I got lots of risk or a concentration of certain risk here? You know, should I be diversifying this? And then also people are very interested in adaptation and resilience. So, you know, what have I got? What can I do to keep this asset and make it, you know, climate proof essentially?
I'm just thinking, say you have a location and it's at high risk of floods. Investors will be very interested in that, as you can imagine, if I'm a pension fund and I'm investing for 50, 60, 70 years in the future as well as now. Say it is in a risk area, what impact does that really have? What do they do?
Yeah, so we worked with a few pension funds and they try to actually make sure they stay out of those areas at the start. And so I think historically they've also done quite a bit of kind of research about that area, but, you know, things are changing. But where they can, yeah, it's about how can we, you know, can we lift the, you know, the kind of the base of the building up so it's more flood proof. We see a lot of that in places like Florida, where you don't necessarily want to leave that market and build or buy anywhere else, but you can actually just, you know, make it higher or make it more resistant.
What about governments and regulators? Do you guys work with them at all?
We do have conversations with regulators and quite often. So the ECB, the kind of European Commission for Banking, I think, we talk to them about things like stress testing. So obviously a lot of regulators want people to go and stress their books. So, it's the kind of the what if these, what's the worst case scenario? What if this happens? How much impact does it have on you? And so we've had a lot of discussions with, how you can do that better. How can you do that in a way where, the results are actually used and taken notice of, and something material happens off the back of that as well. And and then in other kind of areas, we're talking to regulators about, the whole industry as a whole of climate services, about kind of standardizing and regulating the kind of inputs and outputs there as well. So there's kind of lots of conversations going on at different levels.
And how, like, I don't want to sound silly, but like...
I said mammoths when he said at this stage you're fine.
Yeah, but like how does it work? Like, is it a software that's been built, and like how does it?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I can walk you through. I can totally walk you through the process. And in fairness, it's not a silly question, because before I came into it, I was just like, what is this? And so spent a fair time working out what we did. So it is software, and so we have I guess we have 3 products. So our main product is about where your buildings are. You would go online, you would put their locations in, and then it will give you that map of, this is where they are, this is what they look like. We have this really kind of rich database of building information as well. So you put the location in, it picks up the building, and then you pick either your climate scenario, your time frame. So you want to look at worst case SSP 5, 8.5 in 2050. And then what it will do, it will tell you, okay, this is what your hazards look like. So, for tropical cyclones, for flooding, for wind, for wildfire, it will give you this kind of A to F rating, which will tell you something either about the severity of the hazard or how frequent we think it's going to happen. And then after that part, we'll then estimate, what are the losses associated with having this kind of risk. So you can look at the kind of direct losses, if your building is burnt down in a fire, you've got to rebuild that building. But there's also things like indirect losses. So, you may have a data center or a warehouse which has been unaffected by a flood, but if the roads and, the transport network to access it are down, that's going to have a huge impact on your kind of, ability to get things in and out, or people in and out. So we kind of provide, hazards and losses and like indirect losses to then kind of, for you to take that away and work out, well, what decisions do I need to make here?
Okay. And like how many different, because you've mentioned so many different models there, like obviously flood risk, cyclones, transport. How many different like factors does it take in?
We have quite a few. So we have like 10 hazard models, which are the ones that are looking at the physical hazards, the things like the wildfires and all the different types of storms. We have another couple of models that look at things like business interruption or disruption to the network, heat productivity, because obviously things are getting a lot warmer. And then we also have, a whole module on, adaptation. So once you've run that, you go, well, what can I do to adapt this building? If I put flood defences in, or I had subsidence and I need to do underpinning, what's the rough estimate of cost and what's my return on investment? So then there's a whole another part on that bit as well.
And how accurate is it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you can't, this is the thing about climate. So climate change is, it's essentially the average of weather. It's going to tell you about the average of the weather in a future point. And so, from the hazard perspective, we can tell you about risk. We can tell you have risk and what that might look like. And we think about things in terms of it's a 1 in 100 event, or it's a 1 in 500 event. So different severities. So you can get quite a lot of, you can get quite a good feel, and that bit is quite accurate, because you can at least, test your models and back test them and benchmark them against existing events that happen in those locations. With the losses, I think the losses and with the adapt part, it's really about a relative comparison, because again, we're trying to give you an estimate of this is the type of, cost or money you might be spending on this if these things were all to happen. But in reality, we don't know if, next year or in 5 years, you're going to have an event, or you're going to have nothing for 10 years and then 2 really big events. There's no way of capturing that. And so it's very much a relative kind of this one looks much more expensive than this asset, or actually putting in the adaptations. And the same, we can look to kind of research, all of our work is research based, but you can see, how much does it cost to retrofit a building with floodproofing or dry floodproofing or something like that, and then give you a kind of a sensible estimate for today's costs of what that would look like.
I mean, that's pretty fair. Look at the world around us. There's also a whole geopolitical challenge that can come into factor. Who'd have thought? Which can obviously influence cost of things. We're feeling that in our line of work as well from a procurement and perspective. It's really interesting. I think it's quite interesting because you think about investing in, say, your pension, but people like me just go, it's in a pension. You don't necessarily think about the fact that the investment that you're putting into, say, this portfolio of buildings or in the market actually has a huge amount of work that sits behind it to ensure that investment is going to be secure, and so you're going to receive that return in the future.
You are completely right. It's been eye-opening. I don't think I'd ever really thought about my pension until we started working with pension, with pension companies, and it was like, yeah, this makes complete sense. You really need to make sure that these investments are as secure as they can be, because it has a material risk. If these investments aren't going to do what you think they're going to do, that's going to have an impact downstream when you and I retire.
I'm going to have to check my pension now.
Yeah. Everyone's going to be dialing a financial advisor. Yeah, everyone's going to go look at your pension.
Sorry, it's the most grown up I've ever felt.
It's going to have an anxiety attack in the corner. I had no idea about the level of detail that goes into this beforehand. I think one of the questions I had obviously around data centers, are you seeing from the customers that are approaching you, is there certain areas where it's I'd say it's a lot less risk, where you're seeing a lot more companies pushing their investments into, or?
No, so I talked to a few colleagues about this, and data centers are really, they're such a big area right now for us. And there is no kind of one place where there is no risk. They're really looking at kind of a geography and a few potential locations, and then trying to explore, what is the situation here, or if we build in these locations, what adaptations do we need to kind of take into account?
But you're seeing a huge amount of data center businesses approaching clients.
Yeah, a lot of our clients who maybe were traditionally more in kind of traditional real estate are diversifying into kind of data centers.
I mean, we're not struggling for investors anymore. I think the challenge is we're trying to get these things built, and we're building speed to market is the key, and getting power is a big challenge for us at the moment. So one of the big topics for us as a sector, one of the big influence for the increase in demand for data centers has been AI. What role does AI play for Climate X, and have you seen it influence, if you're using it? How are you using it, and what influence has it had on your business?
Yeah, I mean, AI, we are using AI within the company. I mean, it's an interesting one because a lot of our companies are quite traditional, or a lot of our clients are quite traditional and do not want AI. So we have to be very specific about calling out, this is where we use AI, this is where we're using traditional models. But yeah, we're using it to explore, some of the modeling part. We're also using it to explore a lot of the front end part, because, often the same data just needs to be provided in a different way for a different use case. And then, further down the line, there's obviously a huge scope of work of using kind of AI in weather forecasting, climate data, climate modeling as well. That's kind of coming up.
And from a people point of view, when I think about Climate X from what we've just talked about, do you think of it as an AI platform running models? But then I meet you and you're a climate scientist. My brain was talking about space dust and, looking back, it's amazing. So I'm just really interested to kind of understand from a career perspective, and let me rewind slightly, but data centers isn't necessarily an area that people are familiar with. So we don't talk about it in schools. A lot of people don't know that they exist. And if they do, when people talk about data centers, they think the cloud, not the actual clouds that you're talking about, but just the cloud, the cloud. I don't store my data in data centers. I watched a TikTok with Gen+1 and they were saying, we don't store it in data centers, mine's in the cloud. So there's a lack of, I guess, knowledge from a common population point of view of who we are and what we do. And I guess you guys, I assume, something quite similar. Do you find that you're seeing more people wanting to enter sustainability and careers within sustainability more and more?
Yeah, definitely. And, the breadth of the people in our company is, it's astounding. The backgrounds they've come from. We have actually got a few astrophysicists there. But it's a huge range of people coming from really various, from really, really diverse fields who are just like, what, we actually just want to do something good.
Yeah.
And so that has been really nice to kind of come into a company like that.
Yeah, because we're finding from a data center point of view, we want to attract more talent, not just, again, I'm going to go my personal view now, but I think we really struggle at the moment to find the right people in certain roles at times. We have a real challenge when it comes to attracting talent, but I have a real personal strong view that we need to attract fresh perspectives and fresh talent to the market. From a sustainability point of view, data centers are seen to be power hungry machines, basically, in these big boxes that utilize lots of water and lots of power. I think it's actually a slightly unfair thing from a sector point of view, because we've seen over the last 10, 15, 20 years, they're using the same amount of power, but the utilization of them is significantly more efficient than they've ever been. But I do think that the next phase of our sector, as we continue to evolve, is about bringing different perspectives, like you are at the moment. I would never have thought of a climate scientist, really, not to oversimplify Climate X, but you're an investor consultancy firm that's helping them with climate information. I wouldn't have considered astrophysicists and climate scientists when I think about a real estate pension fund.
Yeah, no, and I don't think we would have ever seen ourselves here, to be honest. It's not the kind of path you kind of plan, but I think a lot of it is to do with, with us, it's kind of climate is the thing that everyone's passionate about. And maybe the bit that's missing from the data center story is, and what we were talking about, I guess, before we started here was, everyone relies on them. There's so much of our data, so many processors are using those data centers. They're a really important part of the infrastructure that people just take for granted. And then that's why they see it as like, it's just using up all the water. It's like a big ugly block, but they don't really appreciate kind of, what they're providing for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You should have been on our first episode.
Yeah.
Our first episode was basically what happens if they disappear overnight. If you haven't heard it, listen. A little plug.
And I mean, as soon as you said data centers, it's like, I think, was it Amazon who had the data center go offline last year just for, for a few days?
Yeah.
And that had a huge impact. And that was probably the first time a lot of people were like, oh yeah, when I want to get cash out or when I want to pay for something, suddenly a data center is important. But
Exactly.
Did you listen to episode 1 already?
This is actually scary.
No, it's. I don't think we were saying this in the first episode. I don't think people necessarily make the connection. So like when that happened with Amazon, everyone's just like, well, this is annoying.
yeah.
And like, what do we do? And it's like, well, this is the reason. If we was to connect it back, I think there's making. One of the main reasons I wanted to do this series is like to make people aware of them and like the visit and everything they're connected to and the visibility of them. Because if anything does go down, it's just like, well, that's an inconvenience, well, that's annoying, but it's not actually realizing that it's this part of the infrastructure that's the reason that it's gone down.
Yeah, it's not just to send cat videos on YouTube to your network.
No, that's an important part.
It's a very important topic.
Yeah, it's infrastructure at the end of the day. It's like we should be treating it, I guess, like roads and railways and
Exactly.
the other things we rely on. Yeah,
absolutely.
And like, what do you like, just in terms of climate X, naturally develop, right, as well with the people that are there? I was thinking when you were talking about the type of people in the business, like your Christmas parties and dinners must be so interesting. the level of conversation. But I was just in like, what do you see as like the future of climate X? I imagine there'll be more like models and variables that will come into play. But is there any things that's in the mix with the business that will further develop the product?
Yeah. Oh, that's really. I think where we are right now with kind of AI and how that's going to be used to kind of like, I think, tell more of a story with the data, because I think that's one of the challenges with kind of any provider like us, where you give people a metric, it's an F, it's an E. What does it mean? But being able to kind of give you that context or that story of what does this actually mean to you, that is that kind of like additional context that AI can bring can be really, I think is one of the kind of really exciting things that we're working on, you know, in the next near future.
We'll bring you back on for that when that's done. Well, look, thank you, Nav. I really appreciate it. Didn't really realise in terms of the level of depth and information that goes into making those investment decisions. So I think it's brought like a really good light to the conversation. So I appreciate you coming in today.
No worries, it's been lovely to talk to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.